You begin not in a city of stone and soaring temples, but in the open landscapes of northern Mexico, where the people who would one day be called the Aztecs are still wanderers. They are known as the Mexica, a branch of the larger Nahua-speaking peoples, and their lives are marked by hardship, uncertainty, and constant movement. You can picture them walking through rugged terrain, following rivers and valleys, carrying what little they have while seeking a promised land foretold by their gods. They are not yet an empire, not even a settled community, but a people whose destiny lies far to the south. The story of their beginnings is as much myth as it is history, because the Aztecs themselves preserved their past through oral traditions, sacred codices, and symbolic imagery rather than detailed written histories. You hear the names of gods like Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war deity, who commands them to journey until they find a sign of his choosing. This divine guidance is the force that keeps them moving through hunger and conflict, through the disdain of other tribes who view them as outsiders. To understand the Aztecs, you must step into their world of myth and reality blending together, where divine will and human struggle are inseparable. As they migrate, the Mexica encounter countless challenges. They are not a powerful people yet, and many established city-states treat them with suspicion or outright hostility. Some give them temporary refuge, but most push them away. They are often forced to live on the margins, settling in inhospitable lands such as snake-infested swamps or arid stretches where survival is harsh. You can imagine them clinging to their rituals and their belief in the promise that one day their god will reveal the land destined to be theirs. Their wanderings also bring them into contact with other Nahua-speaking groups and Mesoamerican civilizations, such as the Toltecs, whose cultural influence would profoundly shape Aztec society. The Toltecs were remembered as master builders, warriors and artists, and the Mexica admired them so much that they later claimed descent from them to legitimize their future empire. In this way, myth and memory intertwine. The Aztecs craft a lineage that connects them to the grandeur of those who came before. You can sense the tension in their story. On one hand, they are poor migrants, mocked for their lack of refinement. On the other, they carry within their collective imagination the seeds of empire. Their culture is already steeped in religious devotion and a worldview that centers sacrifice as a way of maintaining cosmic balance. They believe the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the sun and moon, and so humanity must repay that debt with offerings of blood. Even in these early years, their rituals of sacrifice and warrior ethos begin to define them in the eyes of neighbors. Over generations, the Mexica pushed deeper into the Valley of Mexico, a fertile basin ringed by lakes, mountains, and city-states. This region is the heart of Mesoamerica, and already by the time of their arrival, it is home to powerful civilizations, from the remnants of Teotihuacan to flourishing city-states like Texcoco and Tlacopan. To survive here, the Mexica must find a way to coexist among stronger, wealthier neighbors. At first, this means taking on roles as mercenaries. They offer their military skill to established city-states, fighting in their wars in exchange for temporary refuge or meager rewards. Warfare is already becoming central to their identity, a path that will soon transform them from outsiders into conquerors. But the path is not smooth. At times, their ferocity as warriors frightens those who had once hired them, and the Mexica are expelled again and again. One account describes them being forced to settle on the swampy, barren lands near Lake Texcoco, a place so unwelcoming that no one else wanted it. Yet in this inhospitable landscape, destiny will take root. For it is here, in the reeds and waters of the lake, that their god will reveal the sign they had been waiting for, an eagle perched upon a cactus, devouring a snake. This vision, powerful in its simplicity, would become the very emblem of their civilization, the symbol still present on Mexico's modern flag. Before that great moment, however, the years of migration shaped the Mexica into a people hardened by endurance. They adapt to their marginal status by becoming resilient, resourceful, and unyielding in their devotion to their God. Their identity forms not through wealth or land, but through faith and determination. The hardship of exile teaches them lessons in survival and unity, lessons that will later allow them to rule vast territories and subject others to their will. As you stand with them in these early centuries, you realize how improbable their future greatness seemed. Few would have looked at the ragged migrants wandering through the valleys and predicted that within a few centuries they would command one of the most formidable empires in the Americas. Yet the seeds are there, their warrior ethos, their religious fervor, their adaptability, and above all their belief that destiny had chosen them for greatness. These beginnings also reflect a broader truth about history, that empires often rise from unlikely origins, from peoples once dismissed as outsiders or barbarians. Just as Rome had its shepherds and Greece its wandering tribes, so too the Aztecs began as a marginalized group, slowly carving out a place for themselves in a hostile world. You carry this awareness forward, recognizing that their story will unfold with both triumphs and tragedies, all rooted in these early migrations and the faith that sustained them. The journey of the Mexica across northern and central Mexico is not a linear march, but a series of trials and temporary settlements. Each step brings them closer to their eventual homeland, though they cannot yet see it. Along the way, they learn from others, agricultural techniques, artistic styles, religious traditions, and political strategies. They absorb these influences and blend them with their own beliefs, creating a culture that is both uniquely theirs and deeply connected to the wider Mesoamerican world. At last, as they near the Valley of Mexico, the stage is set for the next phase of their story. Their migrations are nearly at an end, but the real test is only beginning. Soon, they will face the monumental task of turning a swampy refuge into a radiant capital, one that will astonish both their contemporaries and the Europeans who later encounter it. For now, you are left with the image of a people still searching, still wandering, guided by visions and sustained by resilience. Their God's promise remains unfulfilled, but hope drives them forward. In the uncertainty of migration, the foundations of empire are quietly being laid. You now walk beside the Mexica as they arrive in the Valley of Mexico, where their long years of wandering finally meet a destiny written in divine command. The valley is alive with the bustle of thriving city-states, each with its own traditions, armies, and markets. Around the Great Lakes, you see canoes gliding across the water, fields of maize swaying in the breeze, and towering temples rising above bustling plazas. It is here, among wealthier and more powerful neighbors, that the Mexica must carve their future. But their beginnings in the valley are not glorious. They are treated as unwelcome intruders, forced to live in the margins of the land, among swamps and reeds that others had abandoned as uninhabitable. You imagine them building makeshift homes from mud and reeds, their feet sinking into the marshes as they try to tame the watery landscape. The other city-states laugh at them, mocking these ragged newcomers, but the Mexica's resilience grows. Out of what appears to be a curse, they will eventually build one of the most remarkable cities in human history. The turning point comes with a vision. Their god Huitzilopochtli shows them a sign they had long awaited: an eagle perched upon a cactus, devouring a serpent. You see this moment as a spark of destiny, a revelation that this swampy island in Lake Texcoco is their promised land. To others it is worthless, to the Mexica it is sacred. With this sign, they begin to build Tenochtitlan, a city that would one day astonish even the Spanish conquerors with its scale and beauty. At first, Tenochtitlan is little more than a cluster of huts and canals. The Mexica struggle to feed themselves, relying on fishing, gathering, and cultivating crops in limited plots. But necessity drives innovation. They begin constructing chinampas, floating gardens made of reeds, mud, and soil anchored in the shallow waters of the lake. On these fertile plots they grow maize, beans, squash, and chilies in abundance, creating a reliable food supply that sustains their growing population. As you picture these green islands of crops shimmering on the waters, you realize that their ingenuity is transforming scarcity into prosperity. The city's growth is not only agricultural, but spiritual. At its heart, the Mexica raised temples to honor their gods, especially Huitzilopochtli, whose guidance brought them here. Rituals of sacrifice and offerings intensify, binding their community together with shared devotion. Every beating heart offered to the gods is seen as repayment for divine sacrifice. Every drop of blood a necessity to keep the sun rising and the cosmos in balance. In this worldview, survival is not just about food and shelter. It is about fulfilling sacred obligations. Yet survival in the Valley of Mexico requires more than faith. The Mexica are surrounded by powerful rivals who resent their growing presence. At first, they are forced into subjugation, paying tribute and even serving as mercenaries for stronger states. But this position of weakness becomes an opportunity. By serving as hired warriors, the Mexica hone their military skills and earn reputations as fierce fighters. They learn the strategies of war, the politics of alliances, and the vulnerabilities of their neighbors. Little by little, they transform from despised outsiders into respected, if feared, participants in the region's complex web of power. You can imagine the early rulers of Tenochtitlan, men such as Acamapichtli, carefully balancing diplomacy and force. They forge marriages with noble families from other city-states, linking themselves to ancient dynasties and legitimizing their claims to rule. At the same time, they lead their warriors in campaigns to expand territory and capture prisoners for ritual sacrifice. Every victory on the battlefield strengthens the city's standing. Every ritual offering reinforces its sacred mission. The physical transformation of Tenochtitlan is no less remarkable. From the swampy islands of Lake Texcoco, canals are dug to transport goods, causeways are built to connect the city to the mainland, and aqueducts are constructed to bring fresh water from springs. With each innovation, the city grows more sophisticated, more resilient. What was once dismissed as a worthless swamp is becoming a thriving metropolis. You walk its growing streets and feel the energy of a people who believe themselves chosen by destiny, turning adversity into triumph. Still, the Mexica are not yet an empire. They are only one city among many, often overshadowed by more established powers like Azcapotzalco. For now, their ambitions are tempered by necessity. They fight when needed, submit when they must, and wait for the moment when fortune will shift in their favor. But beneath the surface, the foundations of empire are being laid. The agriculture that sustains their population, the religion that unites them, the military skill that defines them, and the city that embodies their resilience. As you stand in Tenochtitlan during these early years, you can see both its fragility and its promise. The wooden huts and reed houses seem humble, yet behind them lies a vision of greatness. The chinampas spread across the lake like green jewels, proof of ingenuity born of hardship. At the heart of it all, rising slowly but steadily, are the temples where blood offerings ascend to the heavens. Everything here is infused with a sense of purpose. The Mexica believe they are fulfilling a divine plan, and that belief fuels their rise. The founding of Tenochtitlan is not merely the creation of a city, it is the birth of an identity. No longer are the Mexica simply wanderers or mercenaries, they are now the people of the eagle and cactus, the chosen of Huitzilopochtli, the builders of a sacred city destined to shine in glory. Though their neighbors may still look upon them with suspicion, the Mexica themselves know that their destiny has taken root. The swamps of Lake Texcoco, once a symbol of exile, have become the cradle of empire. In the years to come, Tenochtitlan will grow into one of the most dazzling capitals of the ancient world, but already its foundations are strong. You see it in the determination of its people, in their faith that their God has guided them to this place, and in their willingness to endure hardship for the promise of greatness. The eagle on the cactus has spoken, and the Mexica have answered. You now watch the Mexica of Tenochtitlan, no longer mere wanderers, as they struggle to assert themselves among the powerful city-states of the Valley of Mexico. Their swamp-born city is slowly transforming into a place of canals, causeways, and fields of chinampas, yet the outside world still sees them as upstarts. Every step forward requires delicate maneuvering, for the valley is a chessboard of alliances, rivalries, and wars. To survive, the Mexica must play the game carefully, and sometimes ruthlessly. At first, they are dominated by Azcapotzalco, the great Tepanec city that wields power through tribute and military might. You can picture the Mexica paying heavy dues, sending food, textiles, and prisoners to their overlords. Their warriors fight in Tepanec armies, gaining experience but never autonomy. In these years, resentment smolders beneath the surface. The Mexica know they are strong, but they bide their time, enduring humiliation while sharpening their weapons and ambitions. In the midst of these struggles, their city continues to grow. Wooden houses give way to stone structures, and their temples climb higher into the sky. Leaders such as Huitzilihuitl and Chimalpopoca forge ties with neighboring dynasties, marrying into powerful families to strengthen their political standing. Diplomacy is as much a weapon as the Macuahuitl, the obsidian-edged sword wielded by their warriors. These rulers are not content to remain vassals. They are building a foundation that will allow Tenochtitlan to rise above its neighbors. The turning point comes with Itzcoatl, a ruler who embodies the Mexica's determination to break free. Under his leadership, Tenochtitlan challenges Azcapotzalco's dominance. This is no small risk, for the Tepanecs are formidable, but the Mexica find allies in unexpected places. They join forces with Texcoco, a city whose people had suffered under Tepanec oppression, and with Tlacopan, a Tepanec city willing to shift allegiance. Together, these three powers form what becomes known as the Triple Alliance, a pact that changes the balance of power in the valley forever. With their alliance secured, the Mexica launch a decisive war against Azcapotzalco. You can imagine the battles raging across the valley, the Mexica fighting with ferocity born of years of resentment. Their obsidian blades slice through the chaos, their warriors driven not only by the promise of land and tribute, but also by the sacred duty of capturing prisoners for sacrifice. The fall of Azcapotzalco is both a military and symbolic triumph. The once subjugated Mexica now stand as equals among the valley's great powers. The Triple Alliance proves to be more than a mere coalition. It becomes the framework of empire. Each member city has its role: Tenochtitlan as the spiritual and military leader, Texcoco as the intellectual and cultural partner, and Tlacopan as the supporting ally. Tribute from conquered territories flows into their hands, enriching their cities and fueling expansion. You can almost see the tribute lists: cotton, cacao, jade, turquoise, feathers, food, and captives, all pouring into Tenochtitlan, swelling its wealth and prestige. As the alliance expands through conquest, the Mexica solidify their identity as the leading force. Victories on the battlefield elevate their status, and their devotion to Huitzilopochtli reinforces their claim to divine favor. The great temple of Tenochtitlan rises ever higher, its steps stained with sacrificial blood, a constant reminder that their power rests not only on armies, but on the will of the gods. For the Mexica, war is not merely political, it is sacred, a cosmic necessity that keeps the sun moving across the sky. But war also serves a practical function. The Mexica developed what is known as the Flower Wars, ritualized conflicts with neighboring states designed to capture, rather than kill, enemy warriors. These captives become sacrificial offerings, ensuring that the gods are fed and the city's rituals maintained. To outsiders, this practice is terrifying, but to the Mexica, it is essential, a demonstration of power, piety, and the natural order. You can sense how warfare, religion, and politics are inseparable in their world, each reinforcing the other. As tribute and captives pour in, Tenochtitlan grows rapidly. Its markets buzz with trade, its canals teem with canoes, and its temples pierce the sky. The population swells, fueled by migration from conquered territories and the prosperity of Chinampa agriculture. You walk its streets and see bustling plazas filled with merchants selling obsidian tools, fine textiles, food, and exotic goods from distant lands. The Mexica are no longer the despised wanderers of old. They are now lords of a rising power, yet these gains come with costs. Neighboring peoples increasingly resent the Triple Alliance, especially the Mexica, who take the lion's share of tribute and glory. The empire's expansion creates enemies as quickly as it creates wealth. Small city-states groan under the weight of tribute demands. Their young men taken for sacrifice, their lands exploited for the benefit of Tenochtitlan. Beneath the triumph lies the seed of future rebellion, though for now the Mexica's might suppresses any resistance. As you watch the Mexica at this stage, you see a people who have transformed themselves through struggle and cunning. Once mercenaries, they are now rulers. Once mocked as swamp dwellers, they command respect and fear across the valley. The founding of the Triple Alliance marks the true beginning of their empire, a structure that will endure for a century and bring them to the height of their power. The story of their early struggles and alliances is not just about survival, it is about transformation. The Mexica have proven that they can adapt, negotiate, fight, and ultimately dominate. They have turned weakness into strength, disadvantage into opportunity. From the swamps of Lake Texcoco, they now look outward, their gaze fixed on expansion. Their city is growing, their gods are honored, and their destiny is unfolding. The time has come for the Aztecs to step onto the wider stage, not merely as one city among many, but as the heart of an empire that will soon stretch far beyond the Valley of Mexico. You now stand with the Mexica at the moment when ambition hardens into empire. With the fall of Azcapotzalco and the rise of the Triple Alliance, the foundations are set. But Tenochtitlan is hungry for more. The Mexica believe themselves chosen by the gods, destined to rule, and that destiny demands conquest. What began as survival will now become expansion, a campaign that transforms a swamp-born city into the beating heart of Mesoamerica. The rulers who lead this charge, Itzcoatl, Moctezuma II, and later Axayacatl and Ahuitzotl, are remembered as architects of empire. Under their leadership, the Aztecs refine the machinery of conquest into a system that feeds both their stomachs and their gods. You can picture their armies setting out across mountains and valleys, obsidian blades gleaming, standards of eagle and jaguar warriors flying proudly. These armies are not vast in number compared to modern standards, but they are disciplined, fierce, and motivated by both duty and faith. To die in battle is an honor. To capture enemies alive is a greater one, for captives are needed for sacrifice. Every campaign follows a rhythm. A city-state is targeted. The Aztecs send envoys demanding submission and tribute, and if refused, war follows. Victories bring spoils. Food, cotton, precious feathers, cacao, and above all, human captives. These conquests are not random but strategic, spreading Aztec influence over trade routes, fertile lands, and rival powers. The tribute lists grow longer, the flow of wealth into Tenochtitlan more overwhelming. As you watch, you see the transformation of empire. Conquered peoples supplying the capital with the resources that make it glitter with abundance. Tenochtitlan itself blossoms. The great temple, or Templo Mayor, rises higher, a twin pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of war, and the sun, and Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility. Each victory is celebrated with construction, with offerings, with ritual blood spilled on its steps. You can imagine the drums beating, the incense rising, the captives marching up the temple stairs, their sacrifice both a political statement and a cosmic necessity. To the Aztecs, conquest feeds not only the empire but the universe itself. Agriculture keeps pace with expansion. The Chinampas multiply, producing vast quantities of maize, beans, squash, and chilies. Canals weave through the city, causeways link it to the mainland, and aqueducts deliver fresh water. The city grows into a metropolis of dazzling beauty, stone palaces, bustling markets, and gardens filled with exotic plants and animals. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a Spanish conquistador, would later compare it to Venice. But for the Mexica, it is more than beauty. It is proof that the prophecy has come true, that they are indeed the chosen people. With expansion, society becomes more complex. A strict hierarchy takes shape with the Tlatoani, or ruler, at the top, followed by nobles, priests, warriors, merchants, and commoners. Each has a role to play, each bound to the state by duty and tribute. Warriors rise in status through battlefield achievements, and merchants, known as Pochteca, travel vast distances to bring back luxury goods that enhance the empire's wealth. Beneath it all lies the labor of farmers and craftsmen whose work sustains the grandeur of Tenochtitlan. You sense how the entire system is designed not just for survival, but for glory. Religion permeates every aspect of this expansion. The Aztecs view their empire as a cosmic mission, a responsibility to keep the sun moving across the sky through sacrifice. Each conquest is framed as divine will, each temple offering as repayment to the gods. The Flower Wars, those ritualized conflicts designed to capture rather than kill, become more prominent. They ensure a steady supply of captives for the great temple, feeding the insatiable hunger of the sun. But expansion is not without resistance. As the empire grows, resentment festers among conquered peoples. The tribute system is harsh, demanding food, textiles, labor, and captives in overwhelming quantities. Some city-states rebel, forcing the Aztecs to reconquer them with brutal force. The empire grows stronger with each victory, but beneath the surface lies instability, the tension between dominance and defiance. You can feel the cracks forming even as the empire shines at its brightest. The Mexica rulers also face internal challenges. Succession is not automatic, but chosen from among noble lineages, often leading to rivalries and political intrigue. Each new Tlatoani must prove himself through conquest, for military success is the currency of legitimacy. Moctezuma II, remembered as one of the greatest rulers, expands the empire's borders farther than ever before, but also oversees devastating floods and famines. His leadership shows both the brilliance and fragility of empire, how triumph and disaster walk hand in hand. Still, the arc of this era is unmistakable. The Aztecs are no longer just a city-state, but the masters of a vast realm. Their influence stretches across central Mexico and beyond, their tribute lists reading like inventories of an entire continent's riches. The empire's wealth allows Tenochtitlan to dazzle not only its own people, but also the strangers who will one day arrive from across the sea. As you stand in this moment of expansion, you can feel the tension building. The Aztecs have achieved greatness, but greatness has its costs. Their gods demand constant sacrifice, their rulers demand constant conquest, and their neighbors seethe under the weight of tribute. It is a system of brilliance and brutality, sustained by victory, but vulnerable to failure. The empire has been built, but to keep it alive, the Aztecs must continue to feed it, through war, through sacrifice, through domination. The seeds of glory have been sown, but so too have the seeds of downfall. You now shift your gaze from the battlefields and the tribute lists to the lives lived within the empire, to the fabric of Aztec society and the rhythms of its daily existence. For though conquest and sacrifice dominate the chronicles, the empire is more than war. It is families, markets, schools, artisans, and rituals that together form a civilization of remarkable depth and complexity. The structure of society begins at the top with the Tlatoani, the ruler whose voice is law and whose authority rests on both political power and divine sanction. He is not merely a king, but the embodiment of the god's will, the one chosen to guide the people and ensure the cosmos remains in balance. Around him gather the nobility, priests, military leaders, and counselors, who administer the empire, oversee tribute, and maintain the machinery of governance. Their power is visible in their attire. Rich cotton garments, feathered headdresses, and jade ornaments that announce their status. Beneath the nobility stands the broad foundation of commoners, the Masehualtin, who farm the chinampas, craft tools and pottery, and serve in the armies. Their lives are defined by labor, but they are not voiceless. Each family belongs to a kalpuli, a clan-like community that organizes land, labor, and social life. Within the kalpuli, people farm, pay tribute, and worship together, bound by kinship and obligation. You can picture families tending maize fields, mothers grinding corn into masa for tortillas, fathers teaching their sons to fish or hunt, daughters weaving textiles dyed with cochineal red. Education is a duty for all, another sign of the Aztec sophistication. Boys and girls alike attend schools. The Telpochcali for commoners, where boys learn warfare, agriculture, and crafts, and the Calmacac for the sons of nobles, where future priests and leaders study religion, astronomy, and governance. Girls, too, are taught weaving, household skills, and religious songs, preparing them to uphold the cultural fabric. The emphasis on education reveals a society intent on shaping each generation for the roles demanded by empire. Religion permeates every detail of life, and you can feel its presence in the city streets, in the hum of markets, in the quiet rituals within homes. The gods are everywhere. Tlaloc brings rain, Huitzilopochtli demands sacrifice, Quetzalcoatl inspires wisdom and creation, Tezcatlipoca embodies fate and conflict. Life is lived in constant dialogue with these deities, through offerings of food, flowers, incense, and blood. Every household has a shrine, every community a temple. Festivals mark the calendar with dances, songs, and sacrifices, each designed to keep the cosmos in balance. The most striking element of Aztec religion is, of course, human sacrifice. To outsiders it seems shocking, even barbaric, but within the Aztec worldview, it is essential. The gods gave their lives to create the world, so humans must repay that debt. Without sacrifice, the sun would falter, the rains would cease, and the universe itself would collapse. Warriors capture enemies in battle, not primarily to kill them, but to bring them back alive for offerings at the great temple. You can imagine the processions of captives, the rising smoke of incense, the chants of priests as hearts are lifted to the sky. To the Aztecs, this is not cruelty, it is survival. But daily life is not only about blood and gods. Markets are vibrant centers of exchange and social interaction. The great market at Tlatelolco, a sister city to Tenochtitlan, bustles with thousands of merchants and buyers. Here you find cacao beans, used as currency, fine cotton cloths, obsidian blades, pottery, jewelry, tropical fruits, and exotic feathers. Merchants, the Pochteca, travel across Mesoamerica, bringing back goods from distant lands, turquoise from the north, jade from Guatemala, cacao from the south. These markets are places of abundance, where commoners mingle with nobles, where news spreads, and where the wealth of empire is made visible in everyday transactions. The city itself is a marvel of organization. Tenochtitlan is laid out in 4 great divisions, each with neighborhoods, temples, and schools, all radiating from the central temple precinct. Canals serve as streets, navigated by canoes that carry people and goods. Causeways connect the island city to the mainland, and aqueducts bring fresh water across the lake. From above you would see a city shimmering with order and purpose, its symmetry a reflection of the Aztecs' cosmic worldview. Art and culture flourish alongside power. The Aztecs are master craftsmen, producing intricate featherwork, stone sculptures, painted codices, and elaborate costumes for ritual and ceremony. Music fills the air with drums, flutes, and shell trumpets, accompanying dances that reenact myths and honor the gods. Poetry is highly esteemed, a way of capturing both beauty and truth. Rulers and nobles compose verses that reflect on life, death, and the fleeting nature of existence. In these words you hear a society deeply aware of mortality, yet intent on leaving behind echoes of meaning. Family life is disciplined but affectionate. Marriages are arranged, often at a young age, with ceremonies that bind 2 families together. Children are cherished but raised with strict expectations, taught obedience, humility, and hard work. Discipline is believed to shape character. Laziness is punished, diligence rewarded. You can imagine the warmth of family gatherings, the smell of maize tortillas cooking, the hum of conversation blending with the distant sound of temple drums. Though empire demands much, ordinary lives carry on with rhythm and resilience. Farmers rise early to tend their fields, craftsmen carve obsidian into blades, women weave bright textiles, merchants set out on long journeys, priests study the stars to mark sacred days. It is a civilization sustained by countless hands, each contributing to the splendor of Tenochtitlan and the empire it commands. As you immerse yourself in this society, you sense its duality. On one hand, it is a world of beauty, artistry, and order. A city of canals and gardens, markets overflowing with goods, and poetry that contemplates the mystery of life. On the other, it is a world sustained by blood, where the heart of a captive beats for the sun, and fear of cosmic collapse drives ritual sacrifice. To understand the Aztecs is to accept both halves, the radiant and the shadowed, the glory and the terror. By the height of their society, the Mexica have created not only a military empire, but a cultural world that touches every aspect of human life. Their achievements in agriculture, engineering, art, and governance are as impressive as their conquests, and together they make Tenochtitlan a wonder of its age. You can feel the hum of energy in its streets, the confidence of a people who believe their city to be the very center of the universe. You now stand in the Aztec world at its very peak, the time of Moctezuma II, when the empire has grown vast and wealthy, when Tenochtitlan gleams like a jewel upon the waters of Lake Texcoco, and when the confidence of the Mexica seems unshakable. Yet even at its height, you can sense the fragility hidden beneath the splendor, the pressures of empire straining against the weight of ambition and expectation. Moctezuma II, who takes the throne in 1502, is a ruler both admired and feared. He is a nobleman of immense learning, deeply religious, steeped in ritual, and determined to uphold the divine mission of his people. You can picture him in his palace, adorned in elaborate garments of turquoise and quetzal feathers, receiving ambassadors and generals with stern authority. Unlike some of his predecessors, he distances himself from the common people, surrounding himself with ceremony, elevating the throne to near divine status. Under his rule, the Tlatoani becomes not just a king, but a living embodiment of the god's will. The empire he inherits stretches far beyond the Valley of Mexico. Through conquest and diplomacy, the Triple Alliance now controls vast territories reaching the Gulf Coast, Oaxaca, and Guatemala. Dozens of city-states send tribute in regular waves: cotton, cacao, maize, precious stones, feathers, warriors for sacrifice. The flow of wealth into Tenochtitlan is staggering, And you can imagine the markets overflowing with goods, the temples adorned with gold, the palaces filled with exotic treasures. The city is at once a marketplace, a fortress, and a sacred center, a place that dazzles all who behold it. But with this expansion comes strain. The tribute system grows harsher, the demands more relentless. Conquered peoples labor under the burden, sending food and goods to Tenochtitlan, while their own households struggle. Some regions, such as Tlaxcala, remain fiercely independent, locked in perpetual conflict with the Mexica. Others simmer with resentment, their loyalty forced rather than given. You can feel the tension in the air, the sense that beneath the glitter of empire lies a foundation of coercion and fear. Moctezuma II pushes the empire outward still further, leading campaigns to secure new territories and captives for sacrifice. His armies march across mountains and jungles, facing resistance from determined foes. Victories bring glory, but also exhaustion. Each new conquest requires garrisons, tribute collectors, and constant vigilance to suppress rebellion. The empire expands, but the demands of maintaining it grow heavier, like a weight pressing upon its rulers. Religion intensifies under Moctezuma II, the ceremonies become grander, the sacrifices more numerous, the devotion more fervent. The Templo Mayor is expanded, its steps rising higher, its altars busier than ever. Priests chant prayers to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, offering captives in vast numbers, sometimes by the thousands after great campaigns. The belief is unshaken. The sun must be fed. The gods must be honored. The world must be sustained through human blood. Yet even as the rituals grow more elaborate, you sense an undercurrent of fear, that perhaps the gods' hunger is endless, that no offering will ever be enough. Life in the capital reflects this paradox of abundance and anxiety. The markets at Tlatelolco astonish travelers with their size and variety, some describing them as hosting over 60,000 people on certain days. You walk among stalls piled high with maize, beans, cacao, obsidian blades, fine cotton, jade, and bright feathers. Judges stand in the marketplace to enforce fairness, and scribes record transactions. The sophistication of this commerce is undeniable, a sign of a highly organized society. Yet behind the bustle lies the unspoken reality that much of this abundance comes from the sweat and suffering of conquered peoples. Moctezuma himself is haunted by omens. Stories tell of strange signs in the skies, comets blazing, temples catching fire without cause, and eerie voices echoing at night. Priests interpret these as warnings from the gods, signs of great change to come. You can imagine the emperor pacing his palace, torn between pride in his empire's greatness and unease at what these portents might mean. He strengthens rituals, increases sacrifices, and listens intently to diviners, seeking reassurance that the empire's destiny remains secure. For the people of Tenochtitlan, daily life continues with remarkable energy. Farmers work their chinampas, women grind maize into tortillas, children attend school, warriors train for campaigns, and priests oversee endless cycles of festivals. The city is alive with activity, a place where every street and canal reflects the order and power of empire. And yet, in the hearts of many, there lingers a sense of foreboding, a whisper that greatness can never last forever. The reign of Moctezuma II is the height of Aztec civilization, but also its most precarious moment. The empire commands vast lands, but at great cost. The city glitters with wealth, but relies on the tribute of resentful subjects. The gods are honored with grand sacrifices, but omens hint at coming upheaval. You can feel the strain in every drumbeat, in every ritual chant, in every expansion of the empire's borders. And it is at this very peak, as the Aztecs reach the summit of their power, that fate prepares its most shocking twist. From across the sea, strangers are about to arrive, armed, determined, and unlike any foe the Mexica have ever faced. For centuries, the Aztecs have battled rivals, subdued city-states, and defied nature itself to build their empire. But soon they will meet an enemy who brings not only weapons, but a world utterly foreign to them. The stage is set for an encounter that will forever alter the destiny of the Aztec people. The year is 1519, and your perspective now shifts toward the horizon, where unfamiliar sails appear on the Gulf Coast of Mexico. These ships carry Hernán Cortés and his band of Spanish conquistadors, men hardened by battles in the Caribbean, hungry for wealth, and driven by dreams of conquest. With them come horses, steel weapons, firearms, and diseases unknown to the Americas. For the Aztecs, who have long believed themselves the center of the cosmos, this arrival is as astonishing as it is terrifying. Moctezuma II hears reports of these strangers and the strange beasts they ride. Messengers describe pale-skinned men with beards, animals taller than any deer, weapons that thunder with fire, and ships like floating mountains. The emperor's reaction is marked by deep unease, shaped by years of omens and prophecies. Some advisors whisper that these visitors may be gods, perhaps even the returning Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity long expected to return from the east. Others caution that they are merely mortal invaders. Moctezuma chooses caution, sending gifts of gold, food, and precious garments to Cortés, hoping perhaps to appease them. But these gifts only fuel the Spaniards' hunger, confirming that they have arrived in a land rich with treasure. Cortés wastes no time forging alliances. He recognizes that while the Aztec Empire is powerful, it is also resented by many of its subjects. The Tlaxcalans, bitter enemies of the Mexica, join forces with the Spaniards, supplying warriors, guides, and local knowledge. Other city-states, weary of Aztec tribute demands, follow suit. Cortés proves cunning, manipulating these divisions, weaving together a coalition of indigenous allies whose numbers far exceed those of his Spanish soldiers. You can imagine the unease among the Mexica as they learn of these shifting alliances, realizing that their enemies are gathering strength under the banner of the newcomers. As Cortés marches inland, he is both awed and determined. The journey takes him through highlands, valleys, and thick forests, until at last he approaches Tenochtitlan. Along the way, he encounters dazzling cities and marvels at the organization of markets and temples. But nothing prepares him for the sight of the Aztec capital itself. Rising from the middle of Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan appears as a vision of order and beauty, with its causeways, canals, and great pyramids gleaming in the sun. Even hardened conquistadors are stunned, calling it the most magnificent city they have ever seen. Moctezuma faces a dilemma unlike any his predecessors. He chooses to welcome Cortés into Tenochtitlan, offering hospitality, gifts, and words of diplomacy. Perhaps he hopes to assess these strangers more closely. Perhaps he still fears they may be divine, or perhaps he believes he can control them through ritual and generosity. You can picture the moment when the Emperor and Cortés meet, two worlds colliding in a gesture of politeness, masking deep suspicion. Yet the peace is fragile. The Spaniards soon reveal themselves as conquerors, seizing Moctezuma within his own palace and turning him into a captive figurehead. The city simmers with tension as the people realize their sacred ruler is no longer free. Resentment grows, and when Spanish soldiers slaughter nobles during a religious festival, anger erupts into full rebellion. The streets of Tenochtitlan become battlegrounds, with warriors attacking from rooftops, canals, and temples. The Spaniards, overwhelmed, are forced to flee in a desperate retreat, remembered as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, when many Spaniards and their allies die in the chaos. But the Spaniards are not gone. They regroup, reinforced by fresh troops and bolstered by their indigenous allies. Smallpox, carried unknowingly across the ocean, spreads through the empire, devastating the population. For the Aztecs, who have no immunity to such diseases, it is a disaster more terrible than any battle. Entire communities are weakened, leaders die, and fear spreads alongside sickness. The empire that once seemed unshakable now faces enemies both human and invisible. Cortés prepares for a final assault on Tenochtitlan. With brigantines built to control the waters of the lake and tens of thousands of indigenous allies at his side, he advances upon the city once more. The Mexica, though weakened, fight fiercely, defending their capital with determination and courage. For weeks, battles rage across canals and causeways, temples and marketplaces, as the invaders push deeper into the heart of the city. You can hear the clash of steel against obsidian, the cries of warriors, the smoke rising from burning houses. Moctezuma dies during this time, his exact fate unclear. Some say killed by his own people, others claim he was struck down by the Spaniards. His death leaves the Mexica without their ruler, but not without resolve. His successors rally the people, turning the defense of Tenochtitlan into a desperate struggle for survival. The once mighty capital, jewel of the lake, becomes a battleground littered with rubble, corpses, and the cries of a people fighting for their very existence. The arrival of the Spanish marks a turning point not only in Aztec history, but in world history. Two worlds, one ancient and indigenous, the other European and colonial, have collided with catastrophic consequences. What began as cautious diplomacy has erupted into brutal war, reshaping the destiny of an empire that had once seemed eternal. You feel the weight of inevitability as the siege tightens, as disease spreads, and as the Mexica prepare for the final act of their civilization's story. The siege of Tenochtitlan begins in May 1521, and what follows is one of the most dramatic and tragic struggles in human history. You now stand at the edge of the lake, watching as Cortés and his vast coalition close in on the Aztec capital. Spanish brigantines glide across the waters, cutting off supplies and isolating the city. On the causeways, wave after wave of allied warriors march forward, determined to bring down the Mexica. Inside the city, the people brace themselves, resolved to fight for their home, their gods, and their very existence. The defenses are fierce. Aztec warriors use the canals to their advantage, ambushing Spaniards in canoes, striking swiftly, then disappearing into the maze of waterways. They hurl stones, spears, and flaming projectiles from rooftops, turning the city into a fortress of resistance. Every street, every bridge, every temple becomes a battlefield. You can hear the pounding of drums from the Templo Mayor, urging the warriors on, filling the air with the rhythm of defiance. But despite their courage, the Mexica face overwhelming odds. The Spanish weapons, steel swords, cannons, crossbows, cut through Aztec defenses with brutal efficiency. Horses, though few in number, terrify defenders unused to mounted combat. Most devastating of all, the Mexica face the relentless waves of indigenous allies, tens of thousands of Tlaxcalans, and others who see this as their chance to break free from Aztec domination. For every Spaniard, there are dozens of native warriors fighting alongside them, turning the siege into an avalanche of force. Inside the city, conditions deteriorate rapidly. Smallpox has already weakened the population, and now hunger and thirst add to the suffering. With the causeways cut off and supplies blocked, famine grips Tenochtitlan. You imagine families huddled in their homes, searching desperately for food, hearing the cries of the hungry echoing across the canals. Corpses float in the water, disease spreads, and the once magnificent city begins to crumble under the weight of despair. Still, the Mexica do not surrender. Their leader, Cuauhtémoc, rallies them with fierce determination. Barely more than a youth, he steps into the role of Tlatoani after Moctezuma's death and becomes the embodiment of resistance. He urges his people to fight to the last, to uphold their honor, to prove that the Mexica spirit cannot be extinguished, even in defeat. You can picture him standing on the temple steps, sword in hand, his voice carrying above the chaos, calling his warriors to one final stand. The siege drags on for 3 brutal months. The Spaniards and their allies push deeper into the city, destroying canals, temples, and houses as they advance. Step by step, Tenochtitlan is dismantled, reduced from a shining capital to a ruin of rubble and ash. The defenders grow weaker, but their resistance is astonishing, a testament to their courage and devotion. Even Cortés himself marvels at their tenacity, noting that few cities have ever fought with such desperation. By August 1521, the end is near. The Spaniards surround the last strongholds, and the surviving Mexica are trapped with no hope of relief. On August 13th, Cuauhtémoc is captured while attempting to flee across the lake. Brought before Cortés, he refuses to beg for mercy, instead demanding that the Spaniards kill him rather than see his people suffer further. His defiance becomes legendary, a symbol of the Aztec spirit in the face of inevitable defeat. With Cuauhtémoc's capture, the great city of Tenochtitlan falls. The empire that had risen from nomadic beginnings, that had built a capital upon a lake, that had commanded tribute from vast territories and honored its gods with endless rituals, comes to an end. The Spaniards begin tearing down temples and palaces, constructing in their place the colonial city of Mexico City. The canals are filled in, the temples dismantled, the symbols of Mexica power erased or repurposed. Yet beneath these changes, the memory of Tenochtitlan lingers, a ghost haunting the foundations of the New World. The fall of the Aztec Empire is not just a military defeat, it is the collision of 2 worlds. In the ashes of Tenochtitlan lies the birth of colonial Mexico, a fusion of Spanish and indigenous traditions that will shape the future of the Americas. The Mexica gods give way to Christian saints, but echoes of the old rituals survive in festivals, dances, and beliefs that endure through the centuries. The Nahuatl language continues, the agricultural innovations of Chinampas persist, and the poetry of the Aztecs still speaks across time. And so, as you look back on this story, you see the full arc of Aztec history, from wandering nomads to empire builders, from the vision of the eagle on the cactus to the glory of Tenochtitlan, and finally to the desperate resistance against the Spanish siege. It is a story of resilience and creativity, of beauty and brutality, of triumph and tragedy. Though the empire falls, its legacy remains, woven into the fabric of Mexico and remembered by all who tell its story. Now that you have walked through the entire history of the Aztecs, allow yourself to step back and reflect. You have seen how a small band of wanderers, dismissed and scorned by their neighbors, rose to build one of the most extraordinary civilizations of the ancient world. From the marshy shores of Lake Texcoco, they built Tenochtitlan, a city so remarkable that even their enemies stood in awe of it. Through vision, determination, and sheer will, they transformed themselves into an empire that commanded lands far beyond their valley. You have also seen the other side of their greatness, the sacrifices demanded by their gods, the tribute exacted from conquered peoples, the fragility hidden beneath their splendor. The Aztecs lived in a world they believed was precarious, where cosmic order depended on human blood, where every day was a balance between survival and collapse. This belief gave their world both intensity and urgency, shaping rituals, politics, and daily life in ways both beautiful and terrifying. In their final days, facing overwhelming enemies and unimaginable destruction, the Mexica fought with courage that still echoes across the centuries. Though their empire fell, their culture did not vanish. It lives on in language, art, food, and memory. It lives on in the resilience of the people of Mexico, who carry forward traditions rooted in that ancient world. As you drift toward rest, Hold on to the sense that history is not just dates and battles, but human lives, dreams, fears, songs, and struggles. The Aztec story is one of both loss and endurance, a reminder that even in defeat, identity and legacy can endure. You have walked their entire history. Now let it settle quietly within you.